Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more slug testing, and today we've got another combo that we have not tested yet. Surprisingly enough, I quite honestly don't know how we haven't tested them. They're one of kind of the big three most popular run-of-the-mill rifled slugs you can get off of just about any store shelf, so I'm definitely curious to see how they do through this combo, because the older variation of them did very nicely in our previous test, but you can't get any of those older shells anymore, so now we got to try what you can get, and it's a very popular option, so we'll see how they perform. But for the slugs we've got today, I brought out some of the Federal Power-Shok rifled slugs. These ones are a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 1 ounce rifled slug at about 1610 feet per second. We've tested our fair share of your typical rifled lead deer slugs like this. We have tried some of the old Federal high shock shells, which are essentially what kind of came right before the Power-Shok line. Those did very well. So if they actually kept kind of the same formula with these Power-Shoks, then in theory, they should also work out pretty nicely. But when it comes to a rifled slug, some of them are definitely better performers than the others. Now, I don't expect precision rifle accuracy out of these. We could always be surprised, but usually, if we're getting touching bullet holes at 50 and anything 3 inches or better at 100 yards, that's the kind of range we're looking at with a good, solid performing slug, when they're loaded like this anyway. So we'll see how they perform. But for the shotgun we're running today, I brought out my Remington 870. This is your run-of-the-mill 870. I've got a Hawk Vantage IR scope on top. It's a 3-9x40 with the slug gun reticle in it. It's got a 24-inch barrel on it, and we're going to be running just a regular old stock improved cylinder. The improved cylinder is the suggestion that most rifled slugs give on the box, and from what I found, it's a solid starting point. And for those also curious, I do have the magazine cap tightened down to where it is not going to move, and I've got witness marks scored on everything as well, because when you have a receiver mounted scope like this one is, if this barrel shifts just a little bit, it can throw off your accuracy and where your gun's grouping. But it's been perfect in all of our testing so far, but I can actually see if anything moves on this gun. So pretty much your standard deer hunting shotgun, Remington 870, smooth bore, nothing fancy about it. So as for our testing today, we're going to run it the same as we usually do with these slug tests. We're going to shoot 2 groups. Each group is going to be 3 shots. We're going to take one group at 50 yards and then step it out to 100 yards and take our second 3-shot group. Obviously, 2 3-shot groups at those distances is not a perfect test or a really scientific test, but it's going to at least tell us what we're looking at for a baseline with these slugs and if they're any good or not. And of course, we will be testing them through other combinations, other chokes, stuff like that as we move forward with them. But we've also got the chronograph out here so we can get our velocities and calculate some energy numbers as well. And of course, the barrel will have about 10 minutes or so to cool down between each of the groups, so barrel heat should not be an issue for us today either. So let's get you guys a view of those targets. We'll start at 50, then move out to 100, and we'll see what we get from the regular old 2 3/4 inch Power-Shok 1 ounce rifled slugs. Alright, so we'll look at our chrono numbers real quick before we go look at our 2 targets. Remember, we have a boss claim of 1610 out of those shells. We do have a 24-inch barrel. With these being a rifled slug, they may have ran them through a 26 or 28 to get that claim, but we did have a few shots that were up there pretty close to that number, but I don't think that these were overly consistent with velocity either. I think there was a decent little bit of spread, but we had a high of 1603, so just a tad under the 1610 claim, a low of 1472, so there is a little over 100 feet per second spread there overall. That gave us an average at 1549, so what is that, 61 feet per second below their claim? I could definitely see that being a couple inches worth of barrel length for sure. Mid 1500s or so for a rifled slug is pretty typical out of this gun from what we've seen anyway, with an extreme spread of 131, so again, not too consistent. Don't love that, but if we were able to hold good groups still, then for a 100-yard deer gun, it's still perfectly fine for consistency. It would do the job just fine anyway. And it gave us a standard deviation of 43. So at an average of that 1549, here's your muzzle energy for a 1 ounce slug. Obviously, plenty good enough to do the job for whatever you'd want to use it for. 1 ounce is 437.5 grains. So it's a lot of weight being pushed down range at 1500 feet per second. So makes sense for velocity considering our setup, but let's go check out our targets and see what we got as far as accuracy goes. All right, so here we have both of our targets side by side. My 50-yard target over there on the right, the cardboard and stuff is still a little bit jank on that. I at least need to replace the cardboard, but I'm probably going to make up an actual target board like I did for our 100-yard targets. That way we've got a nice steady target to work with all summer long here. But for now, it'll work. It'll tell us what we need to know. On the right, we have 50 yards. On the left, we have 100 yards. Obviously, my gun is not zeroed to these shells, so we did favor a little to the left, but it looks like a pretty consistent performing load in the accuracy department overall. We'll start on the right here with our 3 50-yard shots. They're all just about touching each other. Technically, I think we've seen a touch better than that at 50 yards, but still, that's perfectly adequate. And we even have one of the little gas seal base wad pieces stuck over here on the left. We'll look at that here in a second. But for our 3 50-yard shots right there, pretty decent all things considered, not terrible. It gave us a 1.52 inch group at 50 yards, so right at 1.5 inches. That's not terrible. And that is from center to center on the farthest 2 bullet holes across. So moving over to the left here with our 100-yard group, our first shot was this guy down low here. The gun did have about 10 minutes to cool the barrel back down in the shade before we started this 100-yard group. So maybe that's a little bit of colder bore. I felt great about every single trigger pull we had today, so I don't think that one was me. Who knows? It could have been a colder bore shot than the rest of them. It could have been one of our lower velocity readings. Who really knows? But it's definitely a flyer nonetheless from where the rest of our shots were. After seeing where our next 2 shots landed, right up here close to each other, right on the edge of the target, I decided, well, I have 1 extra shell essentially that I can burn for today's test. So I decided to use it and took a 4th shot, and that put us right over here, giving us this little 3-shot clump up here. So I think that this little 3 shots is pretty equivalent to what we saw over there at 50 yards. I'll measure it with the flyer and without the flyer so you guys can have both numbers and take whichever one you want. But if these top 3 shots are our actual legitimate group, then that's not bad at all. I think it's going to be right there about our 3-inch spread that we want to see. So with the flyer included, it's right at 5.21 inches. Nothing great or special on that one. But our actual smaller 3-shot little group clump is right at 2.55. So a little bit under that 3-inch goal that we had, and 2.5 inches for a slug gun at 100 yards is a pretty decent performance overall. If we had 1.5 at 50, moving to 2.5 or so, or a little over 2.5 at 100, definitely does make sense. We're doubling the distance and not quite doubling our actual group spread. So it would be up to you whether you wanted to say it was 5 inches or 2.5 inches, depending on if you wanted to include the flyer or not for yourself. Either way though, if we can consistently get 2.5 to 3 inches or so at 100 yards out of these, it's a perfectly adequate performance for sure. I don't know that it was technically as good as what we saw from the old Federal Power-Shok loads. I don't remember the exact number on those, but I think they were a little bit better. I think they were a little closer to touching. But this is the first test we've done with the Power-Shoks, so we'll see how they continue to do through some other chokes and stuff, but not too bad of a start. It's absolutely deer hunting capable, no doubt about it. Out to 100 yards, it would certainly work if you had your gun zeroed to that, so we've seen far worse for sure. And here is that little gas seal base wad piece that sits under the slug. Nothing special to see about it, but it does have a little raised portion in the center here that looks like it kind of fits in the hollow cavity in the back of the slug. So that may be helping our accuracy a little bit with these as well if it's just centering the slug a little bit better in the bore, but nothing special or damaged or anything like that to see as far as this one goes. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about those results right there? Not terrible overall for a basic rifled slug like that. From a smoothbore 870, improved cylinder choke with a receiver mounted scope. It's certainly usable for whatever deer hunting type of application you want to run out to 100 yards or so. It would certainly work. If we want to pick at it a little bit, it wasn't overly consistent with velocities. 130 or something was the extreme spread on it. And we technically did have a flyer out there at 100 yards. It didn't completely ruin our group necessarily. 5 inches is still good enough to do the job. If you just centered it up in the vital cavity on deer, it would work. But if we took another box or two of these slugs and consistently ran them and we're getting 2.5 to 3 inches on average at 100 yards, that's not too bad, all things considered, for what the shell and the combo that we're running them through actually can do. I'll take that. It might not be 100% the best we've ever seen, but it is certainly better than a large variety of other combos we've tested through that same gun as well. So far anyway, when it comes to rifled slugs, the more basic Federal loads seem to kind of be a little bit of a winner most of the time, at least through the guns that I've tested them in anyway. The true ball slugs and stuff from Federal, a little bit different story there. But as far as the Power-Shoks or the old high shock slugs, they seem to be pretty solid performers overall. But let me know your thoughts down below. Is it about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any Power-Shok slugs? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? Is this a combo and a setup you would actually hunt with if you're getting these kinds of groups out of them? Or would you still want to see a little bit better out of your slug gun if you're going to run it? Or maybe you keep it at 50, 60, 70 yards or so and call it a day there? And what other combos do you want to see us run when it comes to putting these shells through other guns or chokes, or putting other shells through this 870? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.